it's safe to say kind of a selfish motivation. One of the things I love to do is find places, right? If my wife and I are going on a trip, I'm the person, best breakfast in blah, blah, blah. And so when Wendy and I were talking about 2025 in terms of where we might race, we knew Whistler is a given. We think we've hatched a scheme for Casco to also be a given. And then the question is, so what do we want to do before and after that? I've got some good freedom to travel, and Wendy has some good flexibility as well. And Daria loves to travel, my wife. So I set out to kind of look around and say, what all is out there besides the things that I've heard about? And as it went along, and as the list grew, I was like, well, is this something that the swimrun community could use, right? Create some greater awareness, geographically, race distance wise, unique features, those sorts of things.
Welcome to the Low Tide Boyz, a Swimrun podcast. I'm Chip.
And I'm Chris, and this is episode 255 of the show. Can you believe it?
Yes.
We've got a great show for everyone this week. We've also seemed to have backed ourselves into a theme this month, but we're just going to roll with it. Joining us to talk about the state of the sport of swimrun on planet Earth is none other than our super intern in charge of special projects, Dave Dammer, to talk about basically the depth and breadth of swimrun across the world. We dive into his research and his findings, and yeah, it was pretty crazy. This was an awesome conversation, and as you're listening to this conversation, you're going to be like, I want to look at this data. Well, we're going to have it on our website. So just head over to lowtideboyz.com. You'll find it there. And yeah, it was really great to have David on. I mean, it was cool. This was cool.
Yeah, it was good. And, we've ran into Dave many races throughout, and his passion for swimrun definitely came through in this episode, and found himself with some more time on his hands, and he's helping us. He reached out and he was like, how can I help you guys? I have more time on my hands, which awesome. So we gave him the honorary title of intern.
Yeah. And then he came up with the project. He started doing the research and essentially, came up with the list of, as best as we could find, every single swimrun event that's happening on the planet. And we won't spoil it, but wait till you hear the conversation. It should make you feel buoyed for the state of the sport and the future. But I think before we get to that conversation, there's actually a lot of swimrun event news to talk about.
Lots of news.
Yeah. So first, Swimrun NC has announced their date for their final race ever, which is April 6th. So if you're considering doing a swimrun in April, we would highly recommend doing Swimrun NC. It's the last one they've done. This race is actually pretty historic in like the journey of swimrun in America. It was one of the early swim runs, volunteer run, awesome swag, really cool course. So we really want to get this race sold out for the last one ever, make it a real celebration of a race that, in the history of swimrun will be an important one in the U.S. for its expansion.
Yeah, and a race that we were lucky enough to do and had a great time. It's certainly a unique swim run, and I think it indexes on all the things, but it's a unique in its own way, which makes the sport so cool. Is every race is so unique, and this one is especially unique. Big ups to Herbert and the race director crew out there. Truly a labor of love. They took a pause off on a year, and they came back, and unfortunately with the weather and the Helene storm, wiped it out for this year, but it's coming back in a big way, and we're excited to promote it, sell it out, and to see you there.
Certainly. And a little bit of bummer news, still in North Carolina, Swimrun Lake James announced that they're going to be skipping next year's event. Apparently, they're much closer to where Hurricane Helene kind of just destroyed that part of the country. So the park is just a mess, and they don't think they can get it up and running by November. So they're just going to actually put that race off for a year, which is a little bit of a bummer. But back to happier stuff. We have a lot of Attila news, Chipper.
Yes. So the ballots or entries were due for Attila Otilo, the Swimrun World Championship.
Yep.
So that's very exciting. And with that, the rankings for the year of swimrun is in the books for 2024.
Yep.
So the rankings are out with the new ranking system. This was the first year that Attila rolled out the ranking system. I think an improvement, much more easier to understand and simpler ranking system that really unlocks a lot of things for the swimrun community. You now gain points as an individual. So if you're racing with different partners or throughout, you can keep gaining your points, and then you put in for your team there. So they did simplify that, which I think was really great. And then they published all the rankings for the most points accumulated.
I think once again, proud to boast that I am the #1 Puerto Rican swim runner in the world.
Congratulations.
Also might be the only one.
I didn't.
Still.
Once I saw your name, I stopped scrolling. And
That's
then,
all you. Yeah, that's all you need to do, man.
Yeah, and you were ranked 15th overall. You had the podium spot with Viv for team Low Tide Monkeys.
Certainly helped.
Bag some more points there, but lots of U.S. teams on the top rankings there. So congrats to everyone who scored points and put in for the entry. Our DMs are already lit with, oh shit, I might get into Attila. How do I get ready for this?
Yes,
So,
it's the precog freaking out. You might as well just wait till Swimrun Christmas. As a little word of advice: enjoy your holidays. Do not worry about it. Enter into the ranking.
Yeah.
Enter into the draw. See where you land, and then decide to freak out or not on the first Thursday in February.
Yeah, always a great, fun day.
Yeah. I still love that Attila refers to it as Swimrun Christmas now, which that's not us, people.
We've left our mark.
Us.
We were taking claim.
Yes,
we're
for sure.
Taking claim to this for sure.
Finally, in Attila news, they announced that as a push to get younger people into the sport, any teams that are 20 or under get 50% off registration for the events, which I think it's great. Talk about like really putting your money where your mouth is, literally, in terms of trying to grow the sport, trying to grow the youth base of the sport. So kudos for that. I think hopefully we'll start seeing a bunch of younger teams show up.
Yeah, absolutely. And 2 notes on the youth movement. And, Trista Minin, team Adorkables, raced with her daughter, who is 10, I believe. They did the sprint or the experience in Austin. Her daughter had a great time. It was so cool to see them cross the finish line and have such a great time there. Also want to call out, if you're interested in what would be like racing with your, a kid or one of your kids or whatever. Child. Check out our episode with Gordo Byrne, team Feel the Burn. He raced with his son Axel. We interviewed them after last year, 2023 Austin race. They were back this year, and Gordo writes about this a lot in his newsletter. So be sure to check that out and check that episode out. I think the way he approaches it is just, it's very,
it's sneaky, a really good parenting episode, I think. Yeah, I certainly picked up a lot of stuff from that. But yeah, Attila, great job. Races are basically in the books, but you want to think about what's in the horizon for you next year all over the world. You got to check out our conversation with Dave Dammer, aka super intern, supremely overqualified super intern in charge of special projects, with his report on the state of swimrun on planet Earth. This was awesome, so enjoy it.
I'm enjoying a cozy noggin because I have a Low Tide Boyz beanie on. Head to the shop to grab one of those as well. That's how we're paying our intern, is with Low Tide Boyz merch.
Swag. Stickers and swag.
Let's check out all the Swimrun races for 2025.
All right. Well, super stoked for this conversation. Introducing to the Swimrun world, is our extremely overqualified intern in charge of special projects, Dave Dammer. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys.
A newly crowned title.
Newly crowned title. Chipper and I just came up with it before we got on air. Dave is a longtime swim runner, supporter of ours since the beginning, a Patreon subscriber. It's all around swell guy. Every time we see him at a race, we're stoked to see him. And so, Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about your swim run journey and kind of like what do you like it?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. A longtime swim runner is a very generous thing to call me. I'm a longtime attempted swim runner. I had done the Survival of the Shawangunks, the SOS triathlon in New York State in the fall of 2017, which that's an unusual triathlon because it starts with the bike. You hand off your bike to your crew person, and then it basically becomes a swim run from there on out, but with no pull buoy or paddles. And it's in a beautiful place, and I kind of fell in love with that, the very unusual aspect of it. And then a friend of mine, Heather, had done a swim run race in the fall of 2018 in Rhode Island, and that kind of got my wheels turning. And long story short, several attempts at Maryland with personal stuff and COVID. I was there 2023 Casco Bay. I was registered for both of the Cape Cod races, and last year I also had a hip injury in the fall. So basically, my first swim run finish was this past August in Mackinac, and I'm hooked. What I love about it is I'm like many swim runners coming over from the triathlon world, and I never did like my bike.
You made do. You had to make do with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and but what I like about it is I love open water swimming, and I love the adventure aspect of it because by my nature I'm not that adventurous a person. So getting me out into trails and things like that is a great stretch. And thanks to our friend Trista, I found an awesome partner, Wendy. So she and I are team D''Hammer and Tongs. If you see us at a race, know that we've put in the work, and that's why we have that name. So we had a lot of fun, and yeah, that's kind of been the journey so far, and hopefully there's a lot more to come.
Love it.
Nice. Well, not for lack of trying for swim runs there. A lot of attempts there, but sometimes the dice don't roll your way, and certain Cape Cod especially has had quite a tricky liftoff there. I think actually specifically for that race, and we actually picked up on this from the Cape Town race. They actually have a Sunday as their backup day. So they say, hey, we're planning on doing on Saturday. Yeah. Sunday's the backup day. And it sounds like that might be something that they're going to deploy, since that's how it's worked out the past few races is, cancel the thing, but the next day it's a beautiful, picturesque bluebird day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been that race, you don't want to throw the C word around too much. But let's say
I think that's kind of what swim run is about, right? You adapt, you find conditions, you have to respond to them, adapt to them, and that's part of the fun of it, right? Is the unpredictable nature of it. It's a good lesson for life.
Yeah, and
definitely,
absolutely, Dave. And you've always been a huge supporter of us here, and just one thing I really appreciate about you is that you're always bringing the upbeat energy and the good vibes too. If you're racing or not, or you're just there to get a fika and cheer folks on, you always have that good attitude that we all
always
find
down.
infectious.
Yeah, Dave's always down for the fika, so
same.
he's here for it, which certainly appreciate.
Really spoke to our hearts.
I don't know. Like, I think on my Instagram still, I found, my wife and I were over in England in May, and I found a truck that was parked this was in Bath, England, and it said something like food, fun, friends, and fika. And I was like, I'm home, Maybe it might have had a coffee reference in there too. So yeah, I was all about it.
Might be our new tagline, Chris. We should borrow that one.
Yeah, we're gonna have to rip that off. So let's get into the heart of the matter. So Dave, you reached out to us, this was maybe a couple months ago now. You're like, hey, I'm going into semi-retirement. I'm looking for a hobby. Want to help you guys. And we were like, oh man, that's awesome. We're not really sure what to do with an overqualified, logistics expert as a super intern for us. But you basically took on this project to basically catalog every single swim race that's happening on planet Earth and talk about a labor of love. I think this is something we've talked about on the show with previous guests. It's like, hey, we're all trying to do our part to really get this thing out there, use our strengths to promote it, to make it bigger, to just, invite people into this community. And you certainly use your strength sort of in compiling this list. So why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of the genesis for this idea? Sure. And then we can get into sort of the interesting numbers that you found.
Great. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm in kind of a career transition phase that was planned. And as much as I was aware of, how it was going to unfold, I wanted to make sure that I had a kind of a sense of purpose and try to take the opportunity to, offer to help in places that matter to me. So that was kind of the outreach. But where this list came from was actually, it's safe to say, kind of a selfish motivation. One of the things I love to do is find places, right? If my wife and I are going on a trip, I'm the person, best breakfast in blah, blah, blah. And so when Wendy and I were talking about 2025 in terms of where we might race, we knew Whistler is a given. We think we've hatched a scheme for Casco to also be a given. And then the question is, so what do we want to do before and after that? You know, if we're sort of free to travel, you know, I've got 4 kids, they're all in their 20s. I've got some good freedom to travel, and Wendy has some good flexibility as well. And Daria loves to travel, my wife. So I set out to kind of look around and say, what all is out there besides the things that I've heard about? And as it went along and as the list grew, I was like, well, is this something that the swimrun community could use, right? Create some greater awareness, geographically, race distance wise, unique features, those sorts of things. And that's sort of what it's grown into. And it's been a lot of fun. I found information in all different corners of the internet, but I do need to shout out, there was -advice.com has a good portfolio of information about races, swimrun.com, and there's another site called atoku.com, and they've each got kind of different ways of organizing that information. Where I landed, kind of how my brain works in my career, I've been somebody who organizes information and then tries to create, you know, plans out of that information. I landed on a spreadsheet. So that's kind of the
Simple
format.
yet effective.
Format that it's in right now. It's
faithful.
been fun to filter it. I played with some pivot tables over the last handful of days here to kind of generate some fun facts and maybe quiz you guys a little bit to see if there's anything about what I found that surprises you. But so, yeah, one of the things that we will figure out is where to put this list so that it can live and, you know, be accessible to folks so that they can see if there's, you know, something they want to try. Or, hey, maybe I got a business trip somewhere. Hey, is there a swim run there when I'm going to be there? You know, that kind of thing. So that's kind of where it came from and where it's gotten to up to literally this morning. I had sent out a bunch of feelers about pending race dates and some questions about distances and stuff. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on social media and my email to see who else is responding, because it's, you know, people are checking and they're being very kind in their responses. So yeah, all really cool stuff, and I have achieved my original goal, which is to find some cool ideas of possibilities for next year on top of what we may sign up for already.
Nice. So this is a complete catalog, or the most complete catalog of swimrun races / events in the world here, on the globe of planet Earth.
Limited only by my internet savvy or lack thereof.
Yeah. And we've, you know, I think a good place for this to live is probably going to be on lowtideboyz.com to get a cheap plug in there. But we've really focused that we have all the US races cataloged on our side, and we've sort of, knowing this manual undertaking, and, certainly this is something that Chris and I have tried to do, is like, we'll let the experts in the other countries sort of they have a better sense of where these things are living, because it is very challenging to understand if the race is happening again here and there. So, but yeah, to have it all in one place, I think will be very beneficial, and, filtering options and VLOOKUPs and all sorts of stuff. It's exciting.
And
The first swimrun VLOOKUP, I think.
All this info comes with, disclaimers and caveats, and that is that in some cases I had to kind of do a little bit of a vibe check, right? If I came across a race and the race had been held in 2022, but not since, and there wasn't sort of any sign of life, so to speak, I might have not put it on the list. And, blanket apology to anybody whose race I may have missed or anything like that. It was limited just by me and my, albeit Gen X style searching methodologies that I employed.
Hey, Gen X all the way over here. Well, I would say, yeah, I mean, I think those disclaimers are great, but I think, one thing that I love about this, and I'm going to start asking you a bunch of questions about it, is like, hey, this is the first time I've seen every single race on planet Earth in one spreadsheet. And I think the thing that surprised me the most, maybe the same for you, Dave, was just the vast number of swim runs that are taking place. I think in the US, we're like, we're humming along with, a dozen races, give or take. But to think, and for us as well, we understand this is a super niche sport. We understand we have our own little private corner of the internet. But to see it all in one place, it's just really, I mean, it's kind of eye-opening how many events. So I'm curious, Dave, why don't you tell us the number of how many swimmer events we think are happening in the world? And then also kind of what was your reaction to as your spreadsheet kept growing and growing?
So I went into this thinking that maybe there would be like 80 or so. I have no idea why I thought that, but
Wow.
in fact, it's 163-ish. And about 30% of those at this point in time don't have dates yet chosen or communicated for 2025. So, those numbers could fluctuate here and there. Maybe some races will be added as well. We've heard some rumblings about, some expansion and things like that with certain race organization companies. So, yeah, 163. If you want to race in the summertime, June is where it's at. There's 35 in June. And if you want
to... Big ready if you're racing in June for 35 races. It's going to be
Unless
warm.
It's Utah in Sweden.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, June, September, and August, top 3 months, 35, 34, and 30-ish, respectively. So plenty of time to get ready. The other thing I saw, I guess, with a number of the races, I was happy to see May is pretty well represented. And, we're kind of in the 6-month window now for people who might be thinking about races, thinking about traveling to races, thinking about acclimatization to cold water, and so forth. And May has a good chunk of races as well. And a lot of these races already do have registration opened. So the thing about the list is that it's not going to do everything for everybody, but it could be a jumping off point for exploration, which is kind of what this spirit is all about, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I remember when Chris pitched me Casco Bay 2018, I was like, yeah, well, let's do it, probably jumping in 2 feet in the deep end without really understanding what was going on. I'm like, okay, we need to train for this. We should find another one of these to do. And we set out to basically do what you just did, but on our own without any sort of reference material. And yeah, we struggled to find any. So this would have been a great resource. And hopefully for people, if you're just kind of coming in, it's like, oh, I want to do a swimrun. Is there one near me? And it sounds like there's a lot more swimruns happening than maybe originally people thought across the globe.
Yeah, a good surprise to have. There's a big opportunity though. If somebody wants to put on a swimrun race in February, right now February does not have any. So
there you go. Corner the market.
Could be a Southern Hemisphere type of thing, I think.
Fair to say.
Yeah.
Dave, so give us a breakdown sort of globally on where these swim runs are. I mean, obviously there's going to be a bunch in France, there's going to be a bunch in Sweden, but what were your sort of surprising findings from where swim runs are being held?
Sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, Sweden's where it's at. Around about 30, probably more that I just haven't been able to find. France, 24, England,
wow.
20. And if you think about the geography, right, just square miles, square kilometers, you don't have to go too far, literally, if you're in or near one of those countries to get to one. And the U.S. is coming along at 13. So those are kind of the top 4. Some smaller countries, in terms of activity. But I didn't know that there was my kids are probably going to laugh at me because they love geography, but New Caledonia is not a place I had necessarily ever heard of before. It's Australia. Australia is racing from March to October.
Wow.
So that's like summer to pretty late, October summer for them, and then pretty late fall in the case of March. One of the things I saw about Australia is all of their races are kind of unified on one race website. It's almost like the Attila family of races, where it's a defined collection. They all have kind of a similar look and feel and that kind of thing. So I wonder if there's sort of a governing body there. You get a governing body sense from countries like Spain as well, and Italy to a little bit of lesser extent. But if you decided you wanted to race in Malta, you could totally do that. Indonesia, yep. Luxembourg, Chipper, you ever want to go to Luxembourg? You can race there.
Oh.
So, Portugal looks like it's got a growing set of races. So yeah, kind of the suspects that you would expect, but also really, really vibrant action in those countries that don't have a large geographic kind of footprint as compared to, say, the expanse of a country like the U.S.
Yeah.
Now, these races, I know there is, doesn't get a lot of airtime on our show, and the aquatic runner sort of series of races, are these being sort of grouped into there? They're a little bit not, they're more summery feeling
solo.
swim runs.
I mean, they're also
more
solo only
specific ones. Do you have those looped in on here, or are we sticking to strictly the partner?
I tried to stick mainly to swim run, and it was tough to tell where I could, as I was looking through the distances yesterday, where I could, I captured some distinctive things like, hey, this is a beginner race and we've got it set up for solo only, things like that. So there is a mix of those out there. And there's also a mix of kids-specific races. I think I counted, there's 16 events that have races that are specifically for kids, ranging from, say, half a K up to, 2K plus, depending on the age ranges. And some of them even have shorter middle distance and longer distance for kids, ranging from as young as 5 all the way up to kind of, 17 or so. And that was a pretty neat find. And France seems to be the place that's doing the most of that, trying to essentially have sort of a festival type of atmosphere in a lot of their races. I think I counted, I divided the distances into short, medium, and long. Arbitrarily, short was less than 10K, medium between 10 and 20K, and anything north of 20K I said was long. Now, to a lot of folks out there, that might not seem like long, but that's just how I happen to divide it up. Out of the 163 identified potential races, basically a quarter of them offer all 3 types of distances. So that's also great to see, right? So opening up the access at the earlier stage of exploration and giving some stuff to do for the people that want, something longer to, I think, Chris, you call it express your fitness, right? At that end of the longer scale, and stuff up there, 40K, 50K. I did, for completeness purposes, include the one water race there, although
that is the
that's
the far end
the
of the
data
spectrum.
a little bit.
Yeah,
that's out there. I'm gesturing way out to the edge of the filter.
way out there. Yes.
So sorry, I went a little far afield with your question, but I've got some fun facts listed down here as well, so I'll try and sprinkle those in.
Well,
no, that's great.
It's really exciting to hear the sort of multitude of race offerings, because I think that's one thing that we saw at Attila Austin, and when we talked to Lars, the race director of Attila USA, the most registrations they've had for the experience in the sprint races. And I think especially in Texas, obviously a very vibrant multi-sport community, whether that be triathlon or trail ultra running or trail running, that sort of thing. But being there, boots on the ground type of stuff, you really kind of saw the people out there that were like, oh, my season's kind of over, but I still want to do something kind of fun. And I think this really has a lot of fun appeal to it. And just, it's a very, if you see a swimrun video or you hear about it, there's a lot of curiosity that starts to build in your head for your first time where you're kind of trying to understand it. So I really love how they are sprinkling in those 5K and 10K races, because, Chris and I know, and too, Dave, like once you kind of get hooked on it, or you get that first transition or two, and you're like, oh, wow, there's something about it that just kind of unlocks a really, really fun event for it. So I'm really, really happy to hear that they're offering so many different run distances.
Yeah, and I want to bring up, I think it's relevant to bring up here. There's a new type of race. I think it's inspired by kind of the backyard ultra style of race,
yes.
But there's some variants to it. And I'm calling them kind of Survivor or Eliminator style races, where you've got a defined short loop. You complete the loop, and then for each successive loop, you have a shorter amount of time to complete it until there's one or two folks left. There's also a similar style where basically it's a defined loop. You have within an hour to complete it. The next loop starts at the top of the hour, and you got to be at that start line or you're knocked out. And there are some interesting places where those are happening. I first got made aware of it earlier this year when my wife and I were in England, and Liverpool has two of them. And it's right downtown. There's like an outdoor swimming, it looks like an open water pool kind of thing. And it's a short loop, and they ratchet back the cutoff times for each loop. There's one in Sweden called 1852 where you get 18 minutes and 52 seconds to complete the loop, and it's just keep going until you can't anymore. There's one in Finland called, apologies for pronunciation, Kuopio, where it's like a backyard ultra format, but it just keeps going. That means you could be swim running at night. And then there's Graph and Water in England as well that I think started up last year. So there's a bunch of those that have emerged, and I think that appeals to kind of maybe the speedier end of the spectrum, a little bit of a different sort of vibe, right? You're maybe in a less nature environment in some of those cases and that kind of thing. And so, why not, right? Why not? And that, I could see that as being a cool thing to do to try and get really, really crisp with transitions, because, every minute's going to count, because in each of those loops, there's at least, 2 or 3 transitions that you're doing. So I think that's a really neat thing that's emerged as a variant, so to speak, on the standard swim run race type.
Yeah, I know As Keen as Mustard had one of those Eliminator style events this year, and our good friends and fans of the show, Mr. and Mrs. B, the Langfords there, participated in that. And yeah, I think there's a couple new formats that popped on even since Chris and I, in the past couple of years have this podcast started. One, we have like this EX kind of super sprint style where it really caters more to, you're not maybe getting out there and traversing across the islands and, out there for 40, 50 Ks, but you're still getting the swim run experience, but just in a little bit more tighter package, better for viewing, and certainly more easy to manage from a race director and logistics experience in terms of water safety and that sort of stuff. If you can literally have eyeballs on the whole course from, a top wherever. So it's really cool to see these different style ones, and it still is swim run. And I think I know, I guess I'll speak for Chris here as well, but like the more swim runs, the better. It doesn't matter if they're the super sprints, the eliminators, or an Attila or one water race style, like just getting more people into it, they will be better for the sport.
Absolutely. And, even there's some even without the eliminator format, there's some races that are straight up in some fairly major cities. Venice has one, Manchester, England, Dusseldorf, Berlin. I mentioned Liverpool, and I think Edmonton is pretty well close to downtown as well. So like I said, there's going to be part of it that'll appeal to a lot of different types of people. You can go to the mountainous countryside. You can go to the French coastline. The French coastline keeps calling to me, I think.
As it should.
You're not alone, I don't think.
As it should. There's also, the possibility, and anyone who's going to check out this document once we share it, you can do the can double, where you could do a can one weekend and then the following weekend do, what's it called? Let me look it up on the thing here. Costa.
Not even going to try.
Yeah, I'm just.
It starts with a Z, right?
Yes.
Costa d'Azur.
Yeah,
Costa.
And Chris, one of the things I had kind of from my observations here is where I was kind of going with this. Remember when I started out on this, I was trying to figure out, well, where could we go to race? And if you're going to travel, what if you could like go for a little over a week and maybe get 2 races in?
Now you're thinking like a Low Tide boy, Dave. I love it.
You can do that. You can do that in May in England. You can do it in June, also in England. September, multiple opportunities to do that. France, you can do that. June, September, and October. Germany in September. So one of the things that kind of formulating the list like this does is you can kind of play with some possibilities and say, well, if I wanted to spend my birthday in September in England and do Coniston and one other thing, 10-day trip, can we swing it? Sure. Or maybe. Or are you out of your mind?
It's at least an option for you.
Well,
All the
you
above.
need to have the facts before you try to convince, significant others and other responsible parties. You at least need to have the facts, and you'd be like, hey, how about we go here and there? And by the way, I'm just going to peel out for a couple mornings here. Yeah, it's super. I mean, it's great. And honestly, I think like if we can just zoom out a little bit, the fact that there's so many swimrun events, again, for us, it's kind of hard in our corner of the internet. Like we're, shouting from the mountaintops. Sometimes it feels like we're just like screaming into the void kind of thing. But, worldwide, it really looks like swimrun is growing. It's healthy. We're seeing these different formats. I mean, huge shout out to EX Swimrun for essentially inventing the super short course concept, and also inventing the safari concept, like the handicap concept where, the fast people start, way later and it's a pursuit style. We Swimrun for really taking the Eliminator, the Liverpool Eliminator style and really kind of like tinkering to make it really work for people. And then all the way on the other end, you have obviously one water race and some of these more diabolical courses. But, Dave, I'm curious, like, as you see this, as someone who loves the sport, like, are you, is this like heartening for you? That's like, oh, it's so great that the sport appears to be growing worldwide, or do you still see it kind of like, it's like, man, there's still so much potential here. Like, this is really just scratching the surface.
A little bit of both. I think I forget which episode it was where you guys were talking about kind of when you go to a place, you're sort of, I wonder if this could work. I've been doing a bit of that myself. There's places where I've lived and traveled to where I'm like, yeah, we could make something happen here. And that's actually, I forgot to mention, one of the things that really kind of put the hooks into me for real is when Trista and I think Marcus was there and a bunch of others. This was in the late fall of 2020. Did kind of just a practice outing in Pennsylvania, and that's where I got to try out kit and figure out stuff. And so then you look around and you see, oh yeah, this could be a place where a race could happen if we could sort out how to get it done locally, or wherever it is. So I think there's that. There's untapped potential, particularly here in the U.S., I think. But also, my gosh, for me, it's going to take me a good while to build up endurance and be able to train consistently to go to kind of the longer end of the spectrum. So seeing just how much kind of shorter and medium opportunities there are out there, kind of the equivalent of the Attila sprint distance, for example, just seeing how much of that is out there is really, really encouraging. And there's one of my kids I keep talking to. I'm like, hey, you're going to learn how to swim at some point? He's like, well, Dad, I don't like to run. I'm not sure I like to swim. So, go elsewhere. So yeah, I'm really encouraged by it, but there's also I think some untapped potential that's out there. But hey, it's what I saw, right? And just looking at websites and kind of getting a sense of, looking at past results and kind of glancing through things, is that there's also a wide range of levels of organizing companies, right? There are some that are, pretty small and grassroots, and others that are literally kind of countrywide organizing bodies, like what appears to be the case in Australia. So I think, the more people talk to each other, the more kind of common knowledge there can be around what does it take to, stand one of these up, get the word out, get enough people to it to make it able to be sustained. So I think some of that's happening. We've also seen some races that have been held before and are no longer held. So, but generally, I think there's more growth than there is attrition from what I'm able to see.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And we know Andre down there in Australia is definitely contributing to the Australian swimrun scene there. Very interesting note as well. Attila or Otalu posted on their stories, hey, what is stopping you from a swimrun? They had a couple, like, oh, I don't know, I'm scared of swimming in the water, hard to find places. And, being a little bit of a data person myself, I message him. I'm like, please send me the answers, because this is like really going to be, this is great data to have. And I think the answers that we saw is that, oh, they are, I think when people hear swimrun, they go right to Otelo and they check it out and they're like, oh, these places, it looks obviously beautiful and they are amazing places to do, but it doesn't seem super easy to get to Orcas. You got to fly to Seattle, you got to drive, you got to take it, like, It's a little bit. So I love hearing that there are some in city centers, Liverpool, Edmonton, and some other places around that I think can kind of get over that hump of people who are, oh, I don't want to do a triathlon of travel to get to a race distance. It can be right there and very easily can tie it into your, your Abbey Road photo op there in Liverpool when you're swinging by.
And the thought I was having about that is, what can be done to kind of enhance the list a bit more, and flagging those ones that are, within, say, half a day's travel of a major airport or a major train hub or something like that. That could be a way to do some filtering as well. But I'm not sure who or when anyone might have time to kind of do that legwork.
You just signed up for it, Dave.
Well, it's a thought that came up. There's always the spirit of continuous improvement. But I think one of the features of the list is there's a column called location, and so you can easily, pop that into a map application and see whereabouts is it. You don't have to do too much mental gymnastics to figure out that it's going to take you a solid couple days to get to Isles of Scilly. But oh my gosh, when you get there, you've got 5 days of fun at any race distance you can think of. So, it's sort of like, what do you want the experience to be? And there's enough variety out there. I forgot to mention, I've become very fascinated with a race called, again, pronunciation alert, Lac Vassivière in France over the summer solstice weekend. And you can race the Saturday night and then again on the Sunday. And the race at night is at night. So I don't know how that works. I don't know how the swim safety aspect works, but just think about, being out in nature, right? You guys describe like when you're at, say, Orcas and you're up there in the forest of Endor and you feel like the only person on earth. I don't know if you've ever done open water swimming at night, but it is a totally different sensory experience going on.
Yeah, it's scary as shit. It's what it is. It's what it is.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's certainly cool. In Puerto Rico, there's a tradition until New Year's, you back up into the ocean. And, typically as a kid, you then go swimming a little bit. Most people would just back in and then walk out. But yeah, swimming at night it's its own interesting experience for sure.
So I'm really, really swimrun curious about that particular one, just because it's pretty unusual. And I think I mentioned one of the other, that Kuopio one in Finland has a night feature as well. So variety, if we, so the messages so far is there's a ton of cool stuff out there, a ton of distance variety, a ton of venue variety, a ton of feel variety, including darkness, and, a wide range of, grassroots race organizers all the way up to kind of bigger entities that are doing this and promoting it. I came across some other really cool stuff. Did you know that today, this afternoon, probably happened already by now? Yeah, it would have been this morning. There's a club in Monaco that does weekend outings. Hey, come, we're going to do a 15K course and go grab some lunch afterwards.
Wow.
In England, there's a club in the south of England that's doing that as well. And there was recently, I think it was last weekend, a multi-sport club in Arizona hosted an event. I don't think it was a full-on race, but it was, let's get together and
we were tagged in on that. And yeah, I think it was, I apologize for not knowing the name off the top of the head, but a few folks that have done a swim run or two, and they're same when they're in their multi-sport communities or their training groups, people, similar experience to what Chris and I had, like, oh, this seems cool. And oh, if these people are into it, I kind of like the stuff that they do, like, tell me more. Yeah. And they just hosted their own kind of little swim run thing. So that was really cool to see in Arizona as well.
It's doing the Lord's work. I think, so much of growing this thing, Dave and Chipper, is really about like, hey, I did it. I had a great experience. How did I share this with other people? So whether you're doing it at your local Arizona tri club and just be like, hey, got some gear, let's just go mess around and have a good time. I mean, it's it's crucial. It's crucial for growing this thing and getting people really excited about what's possible in swimrun,
Right.
and what's possible in terms of, how they want to express their fitness or challenge themselves in a new way. Dave, I have a question for you. So you already mentioned some of the events that you thought looked super interesting. Any others that you were just like, oh man, like, doesn't this seem like an amazing either location to do a swim run or just format that stood out to you?
Yeah, that the Isles of Scilly thing has been on, just going there has been on my wife's and my bucket list for a while. So anytime I can engage her in going, cool races in cool places, she's all about it. And I'm very fortunate in that way.
Nice.
Let me think, man. An excuse to go to Finland. And you don't have to look too hard to find a number of island to island options at shorter distances near Stockholm. So to taste that island to island feel without having to go big. And I want to go back to Casco Bay on a day when we can see where the boats are going.
So highly advisable.
And listening to the Coniston podcast, in my family, we love to go to northern destinations, and, the Lakes District in England sounds just like, a place that would feel, very, very cool to me. And that race happens to be on my birthday next year. So, I'm starting to lean, starting to influence a little bit in that direction, maybe. Although I would love to go back to Cape Cod and actually race it that weekend. So there's, there's just a smorgasbord of interesting possibilities for sure. And I saw one, I want to say it was near Madrid, and they say they have athletes in the thousands. So I don't know if I misread that. Like,
wow.
I was starting to blur over, and Google Translate wasn't necessarily behaving that well. So what would it look like to be just in a big festival environment like that? That's got an interesting appeal. Like, how do you take the swimrun vibe and then expand it out over like a 3-day swimrun event party with stuff for everybody from, kind of the more competitive, and end of the field to people who are just out exploring it and doing it for fun and for the feel of it. That to me sounds pretty cool. And I tried to capture where there were these kind of multi-day things, because, just imagine how many more people you could kind of bring in by having a great experience like that.
I think that's a little bit about what they're trying to do over at EX Swimrun. They have kind of the super sprint on the one day, and then the next day is the long course, but it all kind of is more of that festival weekend style there, which I think is a good way to capture interest.
I think Portugal does that as well.
Yeah, training camp weekends too. Shout out to Envol. I'm part of Envol, to just be clear, as a member there. So for the February camp in Austin, definitely looking forward to. The Keenest Mustard folks have a training weekend in June. The date hasn't been established yet, but those kind of outings are great too, because they don't, it's a little bit, you're going and learning technique, you're meeting people, bonding, without necessarily the pressure of having a clock put to it.
Yeah, and those, great. I think above the, hey, yeah, if you're, it's your first dipping your toe in, understanding, how do I transition the buoy from, when I get out of the swim and swing around my back, and there's all this Swimrun 101 stuff. But even for the more experienced folks, and I think this is something that Chris experienced with his, mixed racing in the mixed division, racing with a different partner, there's just a lot of swimmer knowledge about how does this person do this thing versus how do I do it? Is there a way to kind of level up there? And so those clinics and camps and, weekends offer something for everyone. Yes, a lot on the beginner, really accelerate your knowledge, all the way to, hey, yeah, you've done 20, 30 swim runs maybe. There's still always things to learn based on how other folks are doing it there. So yeah, really something for everybody.
Yep. So we've had a little bit of activity going on in the house because our kitchen is torn apart at the moment. But at a quiet time now, I've got to go through the list and float these ideas to another key member of my household.
Yep. Put your proposals together. Yes.
Well, that's next. It's sort of the Low Tide Boyz tour guide services, where we help you convince your significant others of.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I think
celebrity, and like, hi, Mrs. So and So, Mr. So and So.
when you were talking about the Cape Town race and just the awareness of, hey, it takes a lot to get here. Let's make it a whole experience. A number of the race websites that I looked at had almost led with the tourism component, and the race was just kind of there. Yeah, and by the way, you're going to do this race. It's a 12K. Here's what the legs look like. So, especially some of the more coastal destinations or more resorty destinations, you'll definitely see that kind of approach, which I think has some value, right? If we're gonna spend the time and money to get there, what all can we do while we're at or near the site?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Again, I think this document,
Database.
I think we should it's just a huge database. Again, it's a living document. Don't hold us to it if something is wrong. But Dave, I mean, it's so great to see it in one place, every single race on planet Earth. And to be honest, like it kind of gave me chills to just be like, oh my God, this is something I've been mentioning this on the show for 4 years, that we're living in the golden age of swimrun. And seeing so many events, it's almost like, are we past the golden age? Like, is this thing now like established? It still feels so small and so niche, but to see just like such a breadth of events, different formats, different locations, everything, it's something else. I'm curious, Dave, sort of as a final thought, like as you put this together, were you just kind of like in awe of what was happening, or were you just like, or you're just more like in the weeds, just trying to get like the X's and O's kind of lined up?
The former. I was in awe. And because of how I did this, I wound up having to kind of circle back through the list probably 2 or 3 times. Okay, country, location, link. All right. Now, do these have dates? If they don't have dates, can I find it? Is there a Facebook page? And, just kind of circling back through. And each time I did it, it's like, oh, wow. You see, the differences and similarities with the approaches taken by the race organizers and the pictures and the videos. It is, if you need something to get you through the depths of winter, if you're in this hemisphere, just pop around to some of these race website links and they will link to their YouTube hype videos and everything else, and your soul will be filled in a good way for sure. So just even that, I had to catch myself a few times. My attention span was a little
Racked up
diffused.
the YouTube views, huh?
Even the pictures and everything. It's so cool to see, and these pockets of swimrun community all over the place. There's definitely positive vibes. You can, if you're a competitive person, a number of these countries have like Grand Prix formats, right? Do 5 races, accumulate points. Again, something for everybody. You just want to go and experience nature? Great. You want to go to a city and do one? Super. You want to get competitive and accumulate points and, either win bragging rights or something else? That's out there too in a number of these places. So only limited by your imagination and that of the people who design race courses, as you guys, I think, saw at Whistler, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you have to go to Dusseldorf for work and you can schedule your trip, try to do it in September, just bust out an urban swim run, like why not?
Urban swim run on consecutive weekends at the time of Oktoberfest.
Trifecta.
Yeah, not bad. Not a bad way to live.
Yeah. Well, Dave, again, thank you so much for this. You've certainly, outdone yourself. Certainly, as far as our super intern for special projects, I think you've totally hit a home run on this. And yeah, we'll have this on our website. We're going to be working with, on sort of different formats for it. Are we just going to share the spreadsheet, or depends. We'll figure out what's the best way to do this. Maybe bust it out by country, who knows? But yeah, thank you so much for doing this. And I know I'm speaking for swimrunners who, I would say swimrunners around the world, but swimrunners who listen or watch this show, that everyone's going to be working on their Excel skills.
And again, right, there's a few different sites out there that have some, or there's a Venn diagram where these websites intersect, and I don't want to discount the work that they've done, because year after year some of those sites have been working to try and keep this up. So it's just a different way to look at it and a different way to slice the information, and maybe
For sure.
hopefully as complete as it can be.
Yeah,
well, I've
we'll
mentioned
be sure
this before, but there's this quote by Sir Mortimer Wheeler. It's like, if I tend to see far, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. And I think that's all we're doing. We understand people have come before us and have tried to organize this stuff. As far as I know, this is the first time that every single race on the planet has been put in one place for people to see. So yeah, certainly credit Swimrun.com, Swimrun Advice, Low Tide Chipper for his US calendar that he ran for a couple of years there. Again, this is all a labor of love. And I think, no, I don't think anyone's going to be mad at us for compiling all this in one place, even if it's just a snapshot in time for people to get a sense of what's possible.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll do our best to update any of the currently, less complete information. And, just everybody, this is now heads up racing, right? Keep your eyes open on websites, keep your eyes open on social media pages for registrations to open up, dates to be established, distances will inevitably change and be modified. That's the nature of this pursuit. So this is just one tool, and everybody's mileage may vary on it.
Awesome. Well, Dave, thanks again for your contributions. And Chris and I were looking at the financials, and we're happy we can extend your unpaid internship another 3 months. So congratulations on that. But really appreciate the work.
Just in time for the holidays. That's perfect.
Yeah. Christmas bonus of a Low Tide Boyz beanie. This will be in the mail for you.
You can't put
really appreciate it. Absolutely. Well, Dave,
all right, Dave,
thanks
thank you
again,
so much, man.
See you out there.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a rating or review, since that's the best way to help other people discover the show and the sport of swimrun.
Check out our website, lowtideboyz.com. That's boys with a Z, for swimrun resources, including gear guides, tips, how-to videos, and so much more. Make sure to check out our meme page at The Low Tide Boyz on Instagram. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, send us a DM or email us at lowtideboyz@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Riding Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of our swimrun and other activities.
Lots of activities.
Lots of activities.
Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
Then a run,
And then a swim,
then another run,
then another swim.
then run some more.
Just keep going.
Let's go.
And then stop at some point because,
And fuel. Don't forget to fuel.
Gotta fuel.
Of course, yes.
In the morning,